Hi, good morning, Naimul.
Good morning, Ross. Amazing to have you here. Amazing to have Make Trade here with us on a very
Nice
important
to be
topic.
here.
And we are discussing it for the first time. So I'm very excited about your experience in this space and Make Trade's experience as an organization. Because in Connect we talk a lot about funding, but what do you do with funding? You actually develop locally or you go international, and internationalization is a big part. So we're very happy that you're here. But before we start with our formal questioning sequence, and then of course our community here can also put in questions, and we'll try to blend those in. My first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in this space.
That's a good question, I've been really fortunate, I guess, because I've been involved in international trade since I really started it in the professional life. So I've traveled extensively, working for SMEs, working for multinationals, whether it's in a number of areas, both in logistics, maritime, engineering, whatever. It's food and drink. It's a very wide experience. I probably been to 90% of the countries in the world and done business in them. I've set up joint ventures. I've set up partnerships. I've operated subsidiaries of multinationals, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very lucky. I've had very wide experience, and now I use that for my own ends and having my own consultancy and my own startups, of course. So it's it's quite a lot of experience, and I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to get that.
And that's amazing because typically, when we are talking, so when I'm coaching startups, we ask them to become narrow, thin on one problem, one solution, one sector, which probably is good when you're developing something with a very specific problem solving and purpose in the mind. But a broad experience, like the way you have traveled, the level of companies you have worked from SMEs, multinational subsidiaries, you mentioned, and several sectors and partnerships, I think that's great from an advisory perspective because that's a huge, immense pool of resources and knowledge that they can then push to several startups and companies which are growing in this space. Great. Happy to have you here and your diverse base in terms of knowledge of sectors and countries. What inspired the creation of Make Trade? And let's discuss a little bit about the why of the organization or the vision behind it.
Then I have to, my colleague in Make Trade, Charlotte Kalin, set up Make Trade more than a decade ago here in Sweden. It was set up really to bring together all the partnerships, all the partners of in Sweden involved in internationalization and explore business, particularly with the membership or partnership with all the chambers of commerce in Sweden. However, after a fairly short period of time, that obviously wasn't going to happen because, unfortunately, here in Sweden at that time the chambers had a different challenges, and they all wanted to do their own thing. And fortunately, three of them, the ones in the big cities, decided they wanted to do their own thing, and they saw each other as competition and didn't do really what traditional chambers did. They still did all the documentation and everything, but they also wanted to offer advice and other services in competition to each other, which meant there was no uniformity. And then the other members that we traditionally see in this area, Business Sweden or Export Chartered as it was then, Almi and so on, Tillväxtverket and so on, they all do their own thing. And therefore, it was really hard to bring them together. So we morphed, if you like, into Make Trade, which is a not-for-profit organization, totally independent. In 2016, we set up a side business called Sweden on the Go, which is a vehicle for independent consultants, which are all vetted to join in and to be accessible by whether it's multinationals who don't often use it because they have their own resources, but mainly for SMEs, which are the ones who have a harder time trying to get assistance in the market. Unfortunately, the bigger actors in the market, both then and currently, tend to only offer SMEs the initial service of get your toes wet in the market, and as soon as you got that far, they tend to back off because they're much more supportive of the bigger companies, which leaves the smaller companies, the micros, the smalls and mediums, really exposed to the difficulties of international trade. And the knowledge and the experience, of course, is hard to find. So therefore, we really set up then to help those companies, and whether it be through consulting, whether it be through organizing delegations and trade missions, whether it be country skills, or whatever skills they need to get into the market, we can offer through our various consultants, not all based in Sweden, some are based overseas, many of them based overseas. They have a resource there which they can use, and a competence, I think, and experience which they can use, which up to now has been proved very popular.
Very interesting. Curious that you mentioned about the ecosystem, because I find that a lot. I work a lot in ecosystems. I've built several ecosystems in the Nordics, and each and every time fragmentation comes up as a major challenge, because there are organizations and there are resources which should be pooling strengths together as opposed to creating their own. Why? So I'm very curious. I like it's a side question. Why do you think this ecosystem is built that way? Why is it structured in isolated corners?
I think self empire building is part of it, that they like to
Mm,
do their own thing, and one of the actors, of course, is state owned and state controlled and has
mm,
political influence behind it, and operates in a very traditional manner, unlike their similar organisations internationally. Here in Sweden, of course, I'm talking about Business Sweden. They do everything in house, and therefore are subsidized by the government, and they do not use external consultants, even if those
okay.
consultants may be better. Whereas if we go to Finland or UK or France or States or even Norway, they engage with international consultants in the private sector, and they approve them and they use them, which is a proven way of helping
Okay.
businesses of all sizes.
You also mentioned about your focus, because you said that large organizations might have the resources to employ
Yes,
several organizations. So it seems that you have found your niche in the SME sector,
absolutely.
where you think there is a challenge that they are brought to a door and then left, and then they need to make their own way out.
Exactly, and for SME, but even for the larger end of
Mm,
SMEs, it's actually expensive to employ export or to find
okay.
qualified export staff, because generally they get fairly well paid, and therefore they tend to migrate to overseas companies or to the very large multinationals here within Sweden. And we have no formal training resources for international trade in Sweden. That
Okay.
was stopped I think it was about 8 years ago. The last college or university stopped their last courses in internationalization, and we're left now only with the standard MBA stuff in
Uh-huh.
economics, which really is more technical and theory than it is hands-on. Whereas other countries, again, there are qualifications and courses you can send them on. So we it's very, very hard for staff to get qualifications or training within internationalization or international trade within Sweden.
Okay. So you're saying that even the resources or kind of self-education material, the ways to develop your thinking on internationalization side is being weakened up over the years. Okay,
Very much so.
really good. We have a strong context of the problems now. Let's switch to the SME side or the startup or the scale-up side. Let's call it that cluster. Why do you think it's important to think internationalization? Let's branch a discussion over there.
Okay. I think it depends on the context or the subject matter of the business that we're looking to start up. But at the end of the day, we will have to remember that we live in Sweden. It's a a country of 10.5 million people, it's very the startup scene is very full, as you know, Naimul, as you're involved in it. So sometimes it is very important to think, okay, I have this opportunity for my business idea, I have a startup, etc., etc., etc. But where am I going, and does the market look like? And often the Swedish market has a limit of size and capacity. Sometimes it's better to look at markets nearby or further away to actually do your startup in. It doesn't mean to say you have to be based there, you can still be based in Sweden. And also in terms of expansion, how quickly will you saturate in the Swedish market, or is there too much competition in the Swedish market? So I think there are a whole load of parameters on this, but particularly within the EU and the markets in the vicinity, the whole point of the EU was to make international trade between those countries much easier. And there is this myth, and I call it the Harry Potter myth, that export has this sort of weird, or it's very hard to export, it's difficult, you need to know all this, and etc., etc. At the end of the day, particularly dealing within the EU, it is not too much different than dealing in your domestic country. And starting up business in those countries need not be hard if you know how to do it and you have a guidance on how to do it, and you are careful, of course, one step at a time. So I think, particularly here, if we're talking on the Swedish context, we also have to think about the risk averse issue, that in Sweden we are a bit risk averse, and actually many startups don't always think internationally when they are doing their business plans and their ideas. They don't actually look at that, and they actually could do very, very simply. And sometimes the plan would look better if they did think in a wider scope of markets.
Very interesting points, because you mentioned three things here. I'm summarizing it for a community which is here and which will be seeing this talk later on. You talked about a very important point. You said 10.5 people and market saturation, and we see that in startups. So we are a highly tech nation, especially if you are. I work a lot in the tech sector, for example. So
Yep.
even in tech, it's very saturated.
Extremely.
Going to the
And
same.
pharma
Yeah.
too.
So completely understood. And then you talked about, of course, EU being there, which makes it quite easy to operate in the EU specific domain countries and the risk averse. So kind of relate to all the points that you're making. What are some of the typical challenges you have seen businesses face when they are trying to expand internationally?
The obvious one is lack of knowledge about
Okay.
the market. I think probably one of them is the finance side. I mean, all micro and small businesses generally are looking for finance or looking for financial support. And of course, we live in Sweden, where we don't get support from the banks. The banks see micro business and small business as a liability and something they have to service because they're there, not one to support for international expansion. And that is an inherent problem in Sweden, whereas in other countries, we actually see banks actively sponsoring small businesses to go abroad and sponsoring trade missions, etc. The financial sector is handled. Unfortunately, in Sweden, they are the complete opposite. So we in terms of one of the barriers is always the finance side and finding people to support in finance. Lack of information and experience is one of them, and is the other barrier, and the one I said before, which is risk. It is perceived riskier. This is really a perception, nothing else. It's seen riskier to go and do business in another market than your own domestic market, which is not true. Absolutely not true. But that is unfortunately as it's seen.
But that could come from the cultural thing that we were talking about, risk averseness, and
Yes,
that is magnified and we see that even in typical startup domain in a very different domain. Like when we talk about startup valuation, if you are in London, you can raise a completely different amount for your startup. You go to Silicon Valley, you can completely. So it's a hustle culture, it's think big culture, it's fast growth, fail
yes,
fast culture. But Sweden is hugely conscious of the risk elements, which means startups are kind of seeing, will I look bad asking 5 million? Let's ask 2
yes.
million.
Yes.
Totally agree. It might be a cultural issue relating
Uh,
to one.
yes. Naimul, you're absolutely correct. However, it doesn't matter what country you go to, actually.
Hmm.
In general, international trade is seen as a riskier option
Oh yeah.
than doing domestic business. So that is not a Swedish feeling or emotion. It is just the way
Hmm.
it is. And particularly within the EU, that is not true. There's no
Hmm.
really there's no difference. Within the Western world in general, there's no difference.
But why the banks? Like I'm very curious about why banks behave in this particular way. Like their primary function is to grow business because if they grow business, they grow their own business. That's how the bank thinking is. Like you lend more to businesses, and that's the way you make money as a bank. But very interesting to know that. Let's go to imagine a company is kind of trying to tap into international markets. The big question, typically, which CEOs or management team or the boards or founders will be facing at that point in which market? How does the company solve that kind of thing in their heads? Like, okay, we've decided either Sweden is too slow or we have already tapped into the market quite well and it's time to go international. How do they come to the big question where you were saying there's lack of knowledge and information? How do they overcome this barrier of knowing which is their best market to go for?
Okay, then I would actually say they need to take some advice externally on this one
Hmm.
because one of the biggest mistakes manufacturing companies make is that they go for the low-hanging apples. So we'll send a pallet
Hmm.
here, a pallet there, a pallet everywhere, and make no business. And then that nothing happens, of course. If we're talking about the pitfalls of probably the tech industry when everything is done online, then this is
Hmm.
again the scattergun approach that we'll go to everywhere because we can, because it's easy when you're in the ether up here and we can communicate with anyone. But actually, um, opening up a new market, wherever it is no different to opening up your own domestic market. It's just another market. So when we see the scattergun approach, where we go to lots of
Hmm.
markets, then you're just spreading everything, and there's no commitment to any market. One thing that customers want to see, whether they be
Hmm.
C or B2B, is a commitment to the market, and that you actually have a presence in the market, whether it be online or whether it be physical, but you actually are serious about doing business in that country.
Okay.
And I think that's the number one. And the other thing is that uh, there is a general mistake, particularly on startups and small businesses, that they're here in Sweden and they decide, okay, we've been successful here, so what are we going to do? We're going to go international. Okay, so
Hmm.
let's go and do the US, let's go and do Germany, let's go and do the UK. So they go and their first footsteps into international business is in one of the larger markets. And that's really hard
Hmm.
start with when if you're tiptoeing into the international arena for the first time, go with a smaller market, go with Denmark, go with Finland, go with Holland or Belgium. Do not go with one of the big markets where there it costs you so much more to enter the market, and it will cost you the same as entering your domestic market cost you. Going into a new market will cost you, and there is a general view that, oh no, we don't have to commit any sort resources for internationalization. We have everything in house. No, it's no good having a marketing team and a sales team of 10 people in Sweden and then allocating one person to Benelux or UK or Germany. It doesn't work. You have to have the right resources, whether it be financial or human or capability, if it's manufacturing or online capability to actually succeed. So take tiny steps first, learn, gain
Hmm.
experience. Do not, under any circumstances, just go and jump in the deep end. It's poor strategy.
Very interesting point, because mind basically thinks, okay, here saturation, big opportunity, big market. But you're saying something very interesting that with a big market like US and Germany or UK, there'll be a lot more challenges because the markets are more competitive and your cost of entering. So really good point for entrepreneurs who are listening to this is take an intermediary step. so maybe, as you were saying, explore Denmark, explore
Yeah,
Amsterdam.
and one thing, Naimul, you mentioned there, which I didn't mention, which we should just actually touch on, is the actual competitiveness. I've actually worked with a lot of Swedish companies who want to enter the UK market, and they think they can sell at the same margin and the same price as they do in Sweden. And they have a huge shock when they find out that the price of their products on shelf or wherever they're selling, particularly in B2C sector, are actually selling at almost their net cost in the UK market, or in Germany, come to that, rather than, and they then realize that their value chain does not work, or sorry, their current value chain does not work in that market. So yes, competitiveness is another issue as well.
And while we are on the topic of, we talked UK as a market and Germany and US, let's take, because we also have Brexit. So I want to just take your view on it, what level of difficulty, easiness, or indifference does it bring into moving out to UK for a company, for example?
Okay. Brexit has been over-reported and turned around and has become a political thing to throw around. Brexit in itself was just the EU leaving so UK leaving the EU. But when they left, there's a free trade agreement in place. It is not just cast adrift. There is a free trade agreement in place, and doing business there is actually easier than doing business in the States or Japan or any other non-EU country that we do not have a free trade agreement with. It does mean there are some extra documents required, and it does mean that you, particularly if you're in the biological or animal sector, there are some extra certifications that you need for sure. And you do have to fill in more forms, and there may be duty involved, there may not be duty involved. As I say, there's a free trade agreement. So actually, I hear lots of people saying, oh no, we're going to go to the States, not the UK, because the UK is more complicated. Well, actually, it's not. UK is much, much easier and much, much nearer, and culturally much, much nearer to do business in than the US or Japan or South Africa or wherever. They are very open for business, and it actually, as one of our nearest large markets, we should be absolutely in there. And unfortunately, because of the rhetoric around Brexit, again, we have this huge perceived raising risk, which is not true, absolutely not true.
But that's very interesting to know, and I'm sure not many people know about it, because lot many people are seeing what the media tells them, and it's that side of Brexit, and so we should. So I don't know how that gets solved for startups, and because this, or for SMEs, it should really be. So I don't think that kind of information is known.
To sum that question up, it's business as usual. There is no reason not to go to the UK as long as you go with your eyes open. But that applies to every single market. You should always have your eyes and ears open. Understand your market is the number one rule.
Awesome. Now, in your experience, you worked in several countries as well, and in several levels, and then with Make Trade, you're kind of making it happen for SMEs and small businesses to go international. What challenges have you seen, or what challenges could come in the way of products and services, adaptation, remaking? Like how does that happen? Would like to get some views on that from you.
Internationalization means a number of things, and the number one thing you need if you're going to go to a market, once you've decided to choose your market, and you say, okay, our strategy is to go and open this market, look at it, is go and obtain market knowledge, understand your market, understand your competitors, understand your pricing, understand what the pitfalls are, what the opportunities are. So not all the negative things, but opportunities and all the positives as well. Then deal with them. Don't just think, oh, I've got to change the language or the labeling or something. Go and do it. It's not hard. It's very simple. As I said, everything has a cost. Nothing is free when you're going for a new market. And bear in mind that you might need to have local partners, maybe or maybe not. And the same, I hear a lot of, particularly from the techies, that we can just go into a new market and because we're sitting in Stockholm and the internet is pan world, we can go anywhere on the internet. But actually, you still need an infrastructure because you have lots of liability rules locally. If we go to fintech, we hear them offering, but of course they all have to comply with various FSA or other financial rules that each country has. We see Klarna getting into some difficulty in some countries. We see Revolut getting into some bad press at the moment, all because they have not done their homework on what the rules and what the coming rules are. So I think understand your market, understand what the opportunity is, and then put in place and have your platform for that market ready when you go. And don't try and save money and skimp it. You wouldn't do it in your own domestic market, so why would you do it in any other market? And I think that's the fundamental. Understand your market and then go in. Languages, there are some markets, it's an interesting one, languages. There are some markets where you must be able to speak the language, and there are other markets where you can get away with it. Obviously, in Anglophone or English-speaking markets, it's easier because most Swedes understand how to read, write, and speak in English, very high level, which is fantastic. And other markets, it's so soon these days that everyone speaks English. And okay, you go to Germany, for instance, yes, you can do business on a face-to-face level, on a B2B level, generally in English, yes. However, as soon as you start doing your, if it's something where on B2C, where you're dealing with the consumer, then it has to be in German. And if it's B2B, then you have to have all your instruction books or anything, or documentation in German, as well as English. So there are things that you have to do. And if you go to France, then everything has to be in French, even if they do speak English. So we all know the issues with France. So you have to make your business, as I said before, make it market friendly. You wouldn't introduce a product here in German. So why would you introduce a product in, say, France in Swedish? So it's or in German and Swedish. And that's what we have to remember. Respect your market, understand your market, and understand what your customer, whether it's B2B or B2C, wants.
Very interesting points. I'll summarize that and then we'll go one layer deeper into it. You talked about understand your customer, understand your market, and most importantly, you mentioned the work of do your homework and then bring a market-friendly offering. And then you talked about language, legal side and compliance side, and then you also talked about partnerships. So now this is connected to the homework. So one is that you get hit by these things once you go there and you say, oh shit, I need to go and do the language. I need to be in Germany doing business in Germany, or this legal aspect I don't know about, or I don't have a local partner today. You kind of hit it on the road, or it could be that you could prepare for it. How do you prepare for it? Like, what kind of resources are available for entrepreneurs, and what level of support does your organization provide, or preparedness does your organization provide?
I think that's it, if you like. We're coming back to the what services are available within Sweden to help exporters, and also what financial support. Well, that's easy to answer. The financial support, if we're talking about subsidies or aid or services, that is very limited. Business Sweden offers a very limited support for a number of weeks and advisories, which once finished, that's the end of it. You can pay for more, but there again, is it relevant for your own industry? Because you don't want to support from someone who's a specialist, for example, in food and drink, if you're in the tech industry. So there lies the issue of if you don't have diversity and everything. And is there local based support, which is another requirement as well, because sure, we can all help based here if we have the experience, and I do sometimes work in other countries, in fact, quite often. But that's because I have that knowledge and experience and the contacts. But in general, particularly if you're in a very specialist area, it's better to get the local support locally. And there, in general, there is no money, no subsidies available. We are, as I said before, there's no bank help, there's no sponsorship help within the Swedish market for international expansion. So therefore, my recommendation is within your budget, try and find a consultant, independent consultant within that market, wherever it comes from, and come from us, we can recommend as well, who are prepared to help startups or S&Ms in particular, in this sector. That you will find that that they don't have to be. There is this perceived that consultants are expensive. That's not entirely true, because the word consulting is really misconstrued. You in Connect, you do a lot of mentorship. That's just basic, another form of consulting. Mentorship and consulting help with companies that want to go internationally. It doesn't have to be any more than maybe 2 or 3 hours advice every week where you're going. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be just guidance for 1 day a week. It could be that when you visit the market, that person helps you and takes you around and gets you into that market. It doesn't need to be, 5 months consulting, blah, 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 which costs you a fortune. And I think that's the key thing. Certainly at Make Trade, we encourage our SMEs to get involved with our various vetted and consultants, and we will help them find the right one if we can. If we can't find the right one, we will help them find the right person to help them in one area or another. We also suggest that you get in touch with your local business development organizations. For example, up in Hudiksvall, they're very, very active in Sweden with Hudiksvall Narrowlegs, and they have various promotions that help small businesses get into internationalization and everything else. And it's very variable by region, because some regions have a focus on internationalization for their small business, and other regions they really don't. The other area where you can get help is on trade missions, and some of the specialist industry groups, for example, Skogs Industries and Pharma, certainly. There are trade associations here in Sweden. They do sometimes run trade missions and other trips abroad. And Business Sweden, or depending what category you're in, sometimes will also help with exhibitions to a limited extent. You have to pay yourself, but you will get something, I think, through Food from Sweden also, which is a Business Sweden initiative that helps some companies. But it's limited in Sweden. We are not, as I said right from the beginning, we're not very good at helping our small businesses and micro businesses, even medium-sized businesses.
Okay.
So it's really hard to get the right help, which is why Make Trade is here in the first place, is to hold your hand and help as much as we can.
Good. I like the angle of the service that your organization is doing. And I'm also trying to understand, like for a business, for example, I'm an SME and I want to tap into a new market. And as you said, I'll not pick up, let's say, US, highly competitive. So I'll probably take a neighboring market like Denmark or something, or Amsterdam, as we mentioned. Now, I don't know the market, right? And I want a consultant, for example, to help me out with this. How do I know that the consultant knows?
Well, we vet, certainly as far as we're concerned, we vet all our consultants. We actually, before we take them on, we vet all our consultants, and actually we're in the process of going through a revetting at the moment to make sure that they're still qualified and they're still active, and et cetera, et cetera. And we absolutely will, if they don't meet the criteria that's required, then we will not support them anymore. We're actively looking for some actually new ones at the moment in certain markets, which is necessary, of course. Things change and you can't just keep on that. Sometimes we need to have one specialist, and we did some work for a European funded program in the railway sector. It was last year, and there we actually had to recruit in one country another consultant because we didn't have a contact there, but we found a very, very good one, and we did a amazing project, which we were very happy with at the end of the day. So we're very capable of doing that. We also have some resources where we can use a Swedish consultants that have experience in those markets as well. So myself included, who is involved in some of that. So it depends on the sector and the skills. If it's pharma, we actually pass it on to one of the specialists who's in one of our consultant groups, who specializes in pharma and works all over the world.
Okay, very interesting. So then it means that the word we need to hang over here is that don't go after just any consultant, go after the vetted consultant or have a means. So
Absolutely.
that's an absolutely critical thing as an SME, because you don't want to go into a unknown territory with somebody completely unknown, and then you are double lost.
I've had clients tell me all sorts of nightmare stories where I'm their fifth consultant when they come to me, and they're very happy, hopefully, with me. But they've gone through it, and basically they've had a sort of a really bad experience and haven't got what they want, but being charged money. We won't do that. So I mean, we try to actually offer the service that is bespoke to what they need, and we at Make Trade want to keep our good name as well. So we actually do perform, and if a third party consultant is doing a project for one of our clients, an SME, we will check up, Make Trade will check up and be involved to make sure that that is what's happening as well.
Awesome. Really good. We are at almost the 45-minute of the talk, which is typical length of our Connect talks. So, but I still am very curious about your Sweden on the Go platform, and just want to understand, like, how does that work or simplify the process for SMEs or people who are looking to go international? If you could talk about that.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned this in the previous question, the answer, which was finding the right consultant is really hard. And finding people who could aid you in the market is really, really hard. As I said, in Sweden, we don't have a lot of resources. So therefore, how do you actually find that? And not everyone is as competent as me or some others in finding information on markets. So we touched on another bit before on know your market, understand your market. So therefore, there are a number of parameters you need to put together to find the right person to help you as a consultant. Sweden on the Go, as part of Make Trade, we're actually going to merge them together actually as a little bit of a reorganization in the next few months. But we actually will help you find that right consultant. And it may be that actually initially you don't need an international consultant based out. So it might be that you just need help in getting your structure together for your internationalization, because many small companies, particularly small companies who are already established, they might be post-seed or pre-seed, but they already have a turnover and they're looking, is that they're ready to go and do business abroad, but they don't have any competence in terms of internationalization. They don't have a structure internally. So part of the work can be done locally by the likes of myself and my colleagues within this business in Make Trade, that we can look at that side of things. What do they need to do, and put their strategic plan for internationalization in place and help them get the resources in place. Once that's done, then you come to phase 2, which is finding someone in the local market to help them, which we can absolutely help them with. So it isn't as much that, we're going international, we need someone out there to help us. You actually have to have your structures in place and the resources in place and your strategic plans and business plans in place. And I would also say your international value proposition sorted out as well, because that's another one. We mentioned on competitiveness, so check your value chain before you go and get your feet dirty abroad. And who are your customers? Understand who are your potential customers in the new market, and understand this doesn't have to be specific, but in general, the channel and the sectors you're going into, and then look at also the opportunity. Then once you've got that core basics, then go there, go and find either a local partner, or that's another option to finding a consultant in the market, is to go and find a local partner in the market. But there again, you might need a few days help to find that local partner. again, you come back to local expertise, and
Okay.
local expertise is key.
Awesome, awesome. Uh, Ross, thank you so much. This was so insightful discussion at so many different levels. We kind of started from internationalization, and we have kind of built a journey for everyone who has been here with us and will be listening to this later on. Thank you for sharing your experience and for running Make Trade. I think it's doing a great service for the market out there. Going international. Any final words of advice for the entrepreneurs, startups, or SMEs who are thinking internationalization, maybe just thinking for some time and not doing anything? Like any last words or thoughts for entrepreneurs, and then we can wind up our call today.
Yes, there's one. I'm passionate about international trade, always have been, and I think it's the way forward to build your business. And also, it brings the world closer. The world is a global village, but let's make business and not war in this crazy world that we're in. So I'm all about international networking and doing business. But I would say, yes, get on your horse and go out there. I mean, I would encourage any company who is dithering or sitting on the fence saying, no, should I go international? Might be a bit risky. Go and do it. It's the best and most satisfying thing ever. You meet lots of great people. You do lots of great business. There is so much success out there to be had, and money to be made as well. And it's the way to build your business. Don't limit yourself in as we all said right from the beginning, this is a compact, small market. Get out there. It's exciting. It's fun. And it's just so motivating to go and meet like-minded people and do business internationally. So I would say always go and do it.
Awesome. That's an amazing message. Ross, thank you for taking time out today and meeting us here and sharing your thoughts. We also would like to send a thanks to Charlotte, who was here on the chat, and for everyone else who showed up and who will be seeing this as part of Connect community. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Ross.
Thanks, Naimul. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.